Welcome back. Cooler weather, kids in costumes. Here around Meet the Press World headquarters, that means only one thing. It's election season. We're just 1 week now from Election Night 2023 with key races in places like Virginia, Kentucky, and Mississippi, with results that could echo well into 2024. And joining me now at the big board is who else but NBC News national political correspondent Steve Kornacki. So, Steve, it's Tuesday. Voters will be voting in a week. What races are we going to be talking about?
I think there's 4 places on the map we're going to be paying attention to closely on Tuesday night. A mix of a lot of different things here, but start with the state of Ohio. There are 2 initiatives on the ballot here that I think have some national implications, especially Amendment 1. This would put in the state constitution a legal right to abortion. It would also allow the state to restrict abortion past the point of fetal viability. So we've seen various initiatives in states across the country to put some form of abortion rights protection into law or state constitutions. These things have passed everywhere so far, including in deep red states. There was almost a test vote on this in Ohio over the summer where opponents tried to change the threshold that an amendment would need to win. That thing failed this summer, so just a simple majority, and this would be part of the state constitution in Ohio. Amendment 2 in Ohio is about the legalization of marijuana. Again, something we've seen elsewhere across the country. Is the tide turning on that at all? Is there any kind of a backlash? That's what we might look for in the result here in Ohio on legalization of marijuana. Then go to Virginia, where the Republican governor, Glenn Youngkin, controls half of the state legislature right now. The House of Delegates is Republican-controlled. The state Senate is Democratic-controlled. There has been massive money pouring into Virginia. Republicans badly want to get control of both of those chambers and then really move on Youngkin's agenda. One part of Youngkin's agenda, he has proposed on abortion legal until the 15th week of the pregnancy. That's something he says he would like to do if he can get control of the legislature. Democrats have tried to make an issue out of that as well. So we'll be looking at the Virginia state legislative races. And then we got 2 statewide races. Number 1 is in Kentucky. Democratic Governor Andy Beshear being challenged by the state's Attorney General, Daniel Cameron, a protege of Mitch McConnell, seen a few years ago as a rising star in the Republican Party. Surprisingly, given Kentucky's red tilt that we've seen, Beshear has been leading, I don't want to say comfortably, but by solid margins over Cameron in the polls. Cameron has changed tactics late in this campaign, trying to maybe put a softer edge on his image here. That's a sign, I think, that his campaign knows they're playing catch up here. We'll see. Still, red tendencies in Kentucky, but Cameron is the underdog here going into this against Andy Beshear. And I think the sleeper race here is Mississippi. Again, you think of Mississippi as a deep red state. The Republican governor, Tate Reeves, being challenged by Democrat Brandon Presley, by the way, a distant relative of Elvis Presley, if that holds any water still in Mississippi. But a couple things to remember here. First of all, Tate Reeves has been plagued by a scandal in his administration involving welfare money paid to former NFL star Brett Favre. His image is suffered in Mississippi. And keep in mind, when Reeves got elected 4 years ago in Mississippi, again, supposedly deep red Mississippi, he barely won. The margin was 5 points. So in Mississippi, Democrats have a big floor of support because there's a big population of black voters. And when you talk about a statewide race as opposed to federal office, the presidency, the Senate, the governor's race, you find more Republican-leaning voters willing to cross over and vote Democratic if it's the right kind of Democrat. And Presley has run a pretty conservative campaign, pretty conservative messaging here. So I think Mississippi, we haven't talked a lot about that, but the possibility of a Democrat beating a Republican governor, I think that's a real possibility going into Tuesday.
Well, Democrats just lost their one governor's mansion in the Deep South in Louisiana, so taking one back next week would be a really interesting storyline. Steve, yesterday we talked about the new NBC News Des Moines Register Mediacom poll showing Donald Trump with that huge lead in Iowa, as if that weren't demoralizing enough for the rest of the field. I understand you have new numbers from that poll that will provide even more evidence on how difficult it might be for another candidate to catch him there.
Yeah, I know this has certainly frustrated all of the candidates. Donald Trump has yet to appear on the debate stage with them, has indicated no plans to change his posture on that. I think his opponents felt when this campaign began that he might pay a price with voters for skipping those, that he might be pressured to join in, that they may get traction from the debates that would force him to reconsider. But look, we asked Iowa Republican voters here, does it bother you or not? Should Trump be participating in these debates? And should participate? 42% say he should. Look at this. Nearly 60% say, doesn't matter. That's not the kind of poll number, given the lead we show that he has in Iowa and elsewhere. That's not the kind of number that's going to make Trump think I should reconsider this.
Yeah, given how much we heard, Ron DeSantis, some of the other candidates say that Trump is disrespecting the voters by not showing up. The voters are saying, we're cool with it. All right, Steve Kornacki, thank you for breaking that down.
You got it.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.